Stop singing Kenny Chesney.
How does everybody think the adventure is going?
I'd say solid B minus.
So far, so good by me.
Are you saying the content of the adventure that you...
You don't hear this happening.
Okay.
Shut up, God.
Oh, hi. I like fantasy. I like role-playing. I'm usually Mary Poppins, but that's for a different time to talk about. I want to talk about The Adventure Zone, a podcast that began in 2014 and grew to be one of the most important pieces of fiction in my life. And it was completely unexpected. I'd played Dungeons and Dragons in my life. Yes, I got to that level of nerd. But I always became disillusioned and frustrated by the experience. I never really understood what I should be doing. Reading 12 giant books as reference seemed too daunting. And I think the most egregious fault was that I felt we never got to the adventure. We'd spent hours upon hours in towns collecting materials and talking with townsfolk. I felt like I was being told a boring backstory without ever feeling like I was involved in creating the story. So when enough people recommended I listen to The Adventure Zone, I finally caved. I just couldn't believe that I would like to listen to people play Dungeons and Dragons. And in fact, the first couple of episodes I heard a group of people that were nervous and inexperienced. My patience was wavering. And then the goofing started. The characters began to be more well-rounded, and it grew to be something that I binged over the span of a month. I caught up to the show in real time and was able to experience the last few months of the show crescendo into its final episode. I vividly remember listening to the final episode and crying just huge, ugly tears in the middle of a mall. Mummy, why is that large albino man sobbing so hard that his mascara is running? Johnny, it's not polite to stare, and also Santa's not real. It was a pretty heavy day for everyone. So when it was announced that the first arc of the podcast, the one entitled Here There Be Gerblins, was going to be adapted into a graphic novel, I was pretty excited. And then I got really nervous and eventually became pretty skeptical. Because the thing about The Adventure Zone is that it was entirely conceived as an audio piece of entertainment. A lot of the fun and why it works is because our imaginations are able to create these vast tapestries that often the visual medium cannot replicate. It could also take away from the relationships of three brothers and their dad going through a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. These four men know each other so well. They can goof, commiserate, and scheme together. They can riff on each other's jokes. So much goodness was had on that podcast that really didn't involve the D&D game they were playing. And how about the DM or GM in Griffin McElroy? He infused so much passion and humor and inventiveness to take out his voice seemed like a bad idea. So then this arrived in the mail, except it didn't. Amazon made a mistake and said it had been delivered on Monday, and by yesterday it still hadn't arrived, so I had to go and buy it from the nearby bookstore. But we're good at role-playing, right? Let's imagine that Amazon didn't totally crit fail and did deliver my book on time. I devoured it. I read it all in a couple of hours, and I have to say that I really enjoyed it. There are going to be the obvious differences. Names of characters and places had to be changed because the first few episodes were based on a campaign that's given to you when you buy the starter pack of Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm guessing there was some sort of copyright thing that they were trying to avoid. And they pretty quickly show you how Griffin is going to be included, that the entire adventure is essentially going to be the characters breaking the fourth wall of the fiction. Which, I mean, the podcast did plenty of times.
Is there some way for us to kill both Clark and this dude?
Oh, yeah, we're going to.
You're killing everybody.
Totally.
I thought that was implied. I hope we hit level 2 by killing the other guy.
As soon as Meemaw turns his back.
G-Mech!
Yeah, whatever.
Did he hear that?
We're going to snuff him.
It's G-Mech!
Okay, cool.
The voice of God just yelled his name.
about murdering me!
But it's cool seeing stuff that was originally something that I consumed in my ear holes, written down and drawn. In fact, there are some beautifully rendered drawings all throughout the book. What the book is able to avoid is that nervousness that I mentioned that happened at the beginning. I recently re-listened to the first 6 episodes of the podcast, which this book is adapting, and I was struck by how different everyone sounded at the beginning. In fact, Griffin even mentions how nervous he is before they begin rolling dice.
I'm nervous. Like, I'm not psyched about, like, saying things like Neverwinter and Gundren Rockseeker.
I still miss the true interplay between Griffin the GM and the players, but this story is so rich. There are allusions to the future that started in this first arc. And yet, this has always been my least favorite part of the Adventure Zone. Not that it's bad, but it develops into something so much more. Much like how The Simpsons' first season seems so weird to watch, especially when you know how those characters evolved, I feel the same way here. But the way that the story gradually world builds and layers on difficulty, coming to my absolute favorite part of both the graphic novel and the podcast, when Taco, our wizard, has had enough and goes, Abraca fuck you. It's magical. Like I said, adaptation can be hard. You cannot simply verbatim take everything from a podcast and just produce a graphic novel. I really think that would have been the worst way to approach this. Some things have been cut, others have been abridged, slight tweaks are made here and there. And now that this is being adapted into a precise narrative and not role-played, they can have characters mention things that lay the groundwork better for future arcs. I enjoyed this book immensely. Because I'm so close to the story, I don't know if non-podcast people are going to appreciate it. I really don't. I think there's enough here for the layperson, but perhaps if you are that person, you can let me know in the comments. What I do know is that the writing coupled with the art really works for me, but I'm much more excited about Murder on the Rockport Limited, the next arc that already is promised on the last page of this book. Patrick Rothfuss, a fantasy author that I'm a really big fan of, writes the introduction to this book, and there's a paragraph that I think needs to be repeated. He writes, I'd like to say that the McElroys have done something with D&D I have never seen before. They've done something that I didn't know it was possible to do. They've made something magical and loving and kind and beautiful. The world is better because this story is in it. I couldn't agree more. Let me know if you've had the chance to read this novel or if you've listened to The Adventure Zone. Let's just geek out about it in the comments below. And as always, I will talk with you next Thursday. Finally.